877-3811, 877-381-3811. Question on the table. Get ready, Mr. Call Screener. Question on the table. Does the Republican health care plan repeal Obamacare, or does it repeal any significant part of Obamacare? Does it do away with the federal government's central control over health care? Yes or no? I've been hearing all kinds of arguments. Well, it gets rid of taxes, and I'm thinking, okay, but if you repeal Obamacare, that gets rid of those taxes too. Or is this really a wonderful exposition of how the Republicans can govern? And they needed a win. Now, you're going to be going to doctors, your kids, your grandkids, your parents, your grandparents. You're going to be purchasing prescriptions. You may need a procedure, even surgery at some point. Is that the goal here? The Republicans needed a win? Is that what's so important? And if this is a major victory for we the people, how so? What exactly is repealed? Even more, how will this plan lower premiums? How will this plan lower deductibles? Isn't that the bottom line? Did not the Republicans say, I'm just asking, that they would repeal Obamacare and replace it? Ladies and gentlemen, back in, Mr. Producer dug this up, back in 2013, it actually became apparent to me, really earlier, but this is one of the times I discussed it, that the Republicans really didn't want to repeal Obamacare. And I pointed it out. So this is, it's only a little over a minute. This is from April 24, 2013. Cut 11, go. The bill, listen to this title, Helping Sick Americans Now Act. This is the title that Eric Cantor came up with. To fix part of Obamacare. Helping Sick Americans Now Act. Was abruptly pulled from the House floor yesterday after it became clear it did not have enough Republican votes to pass. So, let's step back and look at this. They're trying to fix part of Obamacare. Not get rid of it, fix it. I talked about this last week, if you recall. Who's behind it? The number 2 Republican in the House, Eric Cantor. He's not even a competent majority leader. He has to pull the bill from the floor because he can't get enough Republicans to support it. Because the Republicans are biting and clawing, that is the freshmen, the sophomores, to do something about Obamacare, to figure out how to gut it, because this nation is going to rise up against it, and Eric Cantor's trying to figure out how to save it. But don't worry, his staffers have been working with other groups, and they're getting the message out to BuzzFeed. It should be called Lapdog Feed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Americans for Tax Reform, usually a reliably solid group. They supported the first version of the Republican plan, and they support this one, and I think they'd support any. They put out a piece today showing us all the great taxes that are going to be cut as a result of the Republican health plan. They say nothing about the $138 billion slush fund. They say nothing about massive tax credits as opposed to direct subsidies. It's appalling. It's appalling. The Republican Party now supports federal government-run health care. Our man Daniel Horowitz over at Conservative Review, he says it turns out the Republicans fully support government-run health care, despite the collapse of the entire system. They just didn't like the tax increases funding Obamacare because Republicans are for serving socialism through debt, whereas Republicans do it by raising taxes. Republicans are for servicing socialism through debt, whereas Democrats do it by raising taxes. The group Americans for Tax Reform is already bragging about the GOP bill's $1 trillion tax cut. That's really nice. We can address that with tax policy. But what about our destroyed healthcare system, which costs the average family thousands per year in premiums and deductibles and drives up the actual cost of the supply side of healthcare? Healthcare is the single biggest driver of the deficit, dependency, and economic stagnation. And government-run and regulated healthcare and insurance is the single biggest reason healthcare is unaffordable for too many people. Now, what are we going to do about it? He says, I'm a strong supply sider, and I would love tax cuts. But unshackling the most important sector of our economy will do more to grow the economy than any tax cut. One reason why Europe has stagnated for decades is because of socialized medicine. It's not a coincidence that since the government-run healthcare in America has reached a tipping point, we've never reached 3% growth and struggle for even 1 or 2%. Republicans have a habit of playing chase the squirrel. Whenever the tab comes due to fulfill a promise on one issue, they immediately discuss another issue. When the time comes to defund Planned Parenthood, they talk about our random provisions in the budget. But when the time comes to restore a free market in health care, they talk about taxes and Planned Parenthood. The taxes have nothing to do with destroying health care. Most of the revenue in Obamacare tax increases comes from the increased payroll tax on the wealthy and the 3.8% surtax on investment income. The main tax that dealt with health insurance, the so-called tax on Cadillac plans, was never actually even implemented. Tax increases are never good for the economy, but they have nothing to do with destroying the healthcare system. It is government-run healthcare through regulations, subsidies, and Medicaid expansion that has destroyed healthcare. And Republicans all love all those elements. Republicans have demanded that all those elements remain. As such, Republicans have no right to complain about tax hikes needed to fund programs they themselves deem indispensable. How can liberal Republicans rail against the taxes and mandates if they fully support, laud, and defend when they fight for the key elements of Obamacare? Once you agree that we need the actuarially insolvent regulations, every economist, from right to left, will tell you that we need an individual and employer mandate so that younger and healthier people pay into the system and can't get out. And once you are funding the cost-crushing subsidies and Medicaid expansion, which they love so dearly, where's the money going to come from? Well, taxes, of course. As such, Democrats were right to raise taxes, primarily on the so-called wealthy. What exactly is the Republican complaint? Meanwhile, Republicans are already preemptively destroying our messaging on health care. The problem with the bill that passed the House is not just the details and structure, although it's a terrible bill, which was made only slightly better by the Freedom Caucus. The problem is the messaging and principles espoused that led to this point, and that will only deteriorate in the Senate. The deal was forged to merely get something passed, quote unquote, as if it were a kidney stone, as Representative Tom Massey quipped, not a soothing medicine needed to heal an ailment. The real problem is that Republicans have already adopted all the premises and messaging of the other side. As Mark Levin said earlier this week, rather than confront the left at the base of their arguments, Republican officials by and large live in fear of principles that they proclaim at election time, but reject at governing time. To use an MMA analogy, Republicans have managed to take their winning issue, with Democrats lying unconscious on the mat, and reverse the roles by placing themselves into the losing sign of a ground and pound. Where are the Republicans pounding the lectern and speaking to the morality of the issue? How, thanks to Obamacare, nobody will have any health care or any health insurance. How Iowa might be added to the list of states without any insurers, thanks to the very mandates these Republicans support. How Maryland insurers will experience up to a 150% increase in premiums after some Marylanders already saw premiums triple and double. How Eastern Tennessee cancer patients can't get insurance, and how premiums in Alaska cost up to $50,000. how Obamacare has created an immoral, government-sponsored monopoly for the few insurers that remain. Instead, Republicans in the Senate will merely focus on Democrat talking points about coverage and pre-existing conditions and just make this bill more liberal because the House kept the subsidies. The House kept Medicaid expansion. The House kept critical regulations. The door is open for the Senate Republicans to take that baseline and focus further on the need to retain or even add more on all three levels rather than address the actual problem. Without actually driving down prices by healing the free market, Republicans have put themselves on the hook for further subsidies. They've kept the market distorting and price-hiking regulations and subsidies, exacerbated by the elimination of the individual and employer mandates. This will place them on defense to raise Medicaid spending even more and dump more money into the high-risk pools. Their $15 billion over 9 years is a joke.
The Blaze Radio Network. On demand.
Hello, America. Welcome to Friday. We're going to start right with this. Turn up 360, please.
Maybe even better. It's a very good bill right now. The premiums are going to come down very substantially. The deductibles are going to come down. It's going to be fantastic health care. Right now, Obamacare is failing. We have a failing health care. I shouldn't say this to our great gentleman and my friend from Australia, because you have better health care than we do.
Australia has better health care than we do. Republicans, here is your leader. We begin right now.
Of entertainment and enlightenment. This is the Glenn Beck Program.
My friend, I think you're exactly right. Pat said, play this clip again. Now, this is sitting with the Prime Minister of Australia. Listen.
Could get maybe even better. It's a very good bill right now. The premiums are going to come down very substantially. The deductibles are going to come down.
I've heard that before.
It's going to be fantastic health care. Yeah. Right now, Obamacare is failing. We have a failing health care. I shouldn't say this to our great gentleman and my friend from Australia, because you have better health care than we do.
I don't know. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Do you notice he said I shouldn't say this with my great friend and this great guy.
He's just from another place.
From Austria or something like that.
I call him dude.
Yeah. Oh, and I only know that. I only know that to be true because that's what I do.
What we all do.
That's what I do.
You look over at somebody and you want to address them, but you can't because you're just not sure what their name is.
Right. Or you know their name, but you're so afraid of being wrong that you don't.
Yes.
So you're like, and I'm good. And you know what's really humiliating is when you're like, and I would like to say it in front of our good friend here. And they're like, Bill. They know because they do it too.
Yes.
Anyway, this is, I believe, another prediction just coming through a different way. Remember what I said in 2008? Let's see if Natasha can find it. During 2008, and I know you'll remember this, I've said a thousand times, I'm not sure if you want the Republicans to be in office after Barack Obama. Why? Because it's all the chickens are going to come home to roost. The recession will reveal itself, and it could go into a depression. We could have collapse. We could have all of these wars coming to roost, all of these things, and health care. Healthcare doesn't work. It's going to collapse. And so it will put the Republicans in a place of having to fix it. They will fix it, and it will fail, and everyone will say at the end, we tried the great conservative fix, and it failed.
Which obviously is nowhere near conservative.
Correct. Full Marxist principles. Mm-hmm. I've been warning against that since 2008. That's what's going to happen. He's fixed it. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. Our premiums are going to come down. There's two things that are happening. First, your premiums are not going to come down. Maybe in some miracle. But this is not going to fix healthcare. This is going to make healthcare worse. If your healthcare bill goes down, your deficit goes through the roof. One of the two. We're either going to be looking at $30 trillion in deficit and debt, or we're going to be looking at higher premiums. Most likely, we'll be looking at both. You'll notice they passed this before a CBO score. And one of the reasons why they passed it so quickly is exactly the same reason Obama did. They don't want the CBO score because the Congressional Budget Office is going to say your $8 billion bailout that the government, this was the Freedom Caucus fix. Well, the government will have to make a pool of $8 billion. The speculation is that you're looking at that the CBO will come out and say, you need $50 billion or that will collapse. CBO, have you ever seen the CBO write or overestimate?
No.
I've never seen them wow, they said it was going to cost $50 billion and it only cost $30.
And they did that with Obamacare by a factor of about 3.
Right. And so they're passing this because it is so bad when you get to the math of it. That's why they pushed it now before CBO. And where was everybody screaming? Where was everyone on the right screaming for, can we see the details of this bill? Can we see the score? What's the CBO score of this bill? I know we were all screaming for it because we said it was so important, because whatever the CBO would say, you'd have to at least double that. But this time, nobody said a word. So, the first thing that's going to happen here is this is our first real step towards total socialized medicine, because this is not going to work. And by the time this is showing that it is collapsing, you will be ready for yet another election. And they'll be able to say, see, they did this and it doesn't work. Bernie Sanders. Second thing that is happening. By the time, this is why this will now never be fixed. We will never repeal it. We will never replace it. We will never go back to a free market system unless we have a total reset of everything. But you better pray you know who's at top when they are resetting it. But here's why we'll never go back now. It's 2017. I don't know about you, but I'm still writing 2006 on my checks. What happened to the last 10 or 11 years? They're just gone so fast. We are closer to 2030 than we are to 9/11. Do you remember in 9/11 when we talked about 2020, we talked about 2030, and that seemed like a million years from... we wondered if we would even be alive by 2030. You remember that? Because that's the way I was thinking. Now I'm thinking, damn well better be alive. What, am I going to hit by a train? Of course I'm going to be alive in 2030. We're that close to it. Here's why I say that. Kids that were born on 9/11 are 17 years old, 16 years old. Born on 9/11. You have erased the memory. You can't talk to them about going back to the America that was great, the America that didn't spy on people, that when we were free. They don't understand that. They don't know what that was like. That's like living in a house without running water. I can't relate to that. Living in a house without electricity. I can't relate to that. Oh, I just want to go back to where you could go to your druggist and he just mix up the powders and give them to you. What? Without any testing? Without the FDA? Without a label? It was just some guy behind the counter mixing powders? No, thank you. That's the way they view America. They will not understand a time when you could just go to a doctor and a doctor could do what the doctor did and you could pay for it and you had reasonable insurance. All of that is not going to be part of their memory. If you were born in 2000, you really don't know that because when it was free before Obamacare, you were too young to even recognize it. And the drift is so slow, you won't go back. Now, here's how I view things in a completely different way than I did before I read the book Defying Hitler. Defying Hitler is a book that was written in the 1930s, but it wasn't published until 2006. My eyes were opened in such a new way reading this. This is from a guy who grew up in Germany, and he was coming of age during the First World War. He was young, and he just happened to be different than all of his other friends. He wrote this book as he saw the Weimar Republic and then Hitler on the rise, and then he really buckled down and wrote this book in the 1930s up until about 1936 or 38. He was writing it to warn. He was like, I'm going to send this to a publisher overseas to warn people. You don't know what you're dealing with here. This is not what you think it is. Well, he got out in 38 because things got so bad. He stopped writing it and he put it on the shelf. Now, he came over here and he has written the definitive books on Germany and on Hitler. He's died recently. In 2006, after his death, his children found this manuscript and they're like, why wasn't this published? This is fantastic. Why didn't Grandpa publish this one? So they published it as is. So it's very, unsatisfying because it just stops. The day he left, he stopped writing it. And so you're like, okay, wait, I know how the story ends, but there's no more here? He gave an understanding of how, how you always say, how could these people, they were decent people, how were they all swept up into this? How did that happen? Mm-hmm. Fascinating to hear it from a guy who was coming of age and in his 20s in the late 1920s and 30s. The kids who understood Germany, the First World War changed everything. 1914, the churches and all of the pulpits were preaching, you got to fall in line on this. This is going to be great for Germany. This is God's will for Germany. He's going to use this to shape Germany. It's going to be great. We got to fight. Well, after the war ended so horribly and so humiliating for the German people, they lost their reason and they lost their faith, as Rudyard Kipling would say.
You're talking about First World War?
First World War. Yeah. So the people lost their faith and they disconnected from really believing that their pulpits were rooted in any kind of truth at all. Then the humiliation built on them and the hard work and then the money supply with the hyperinflation. And when hyperinflation happened, that's when kids his age, 20-year-olds, they could walk in and they didn't have kids. They didn't have families. And so a lot of these guys would work and they didn't have to go to the grocery store and spend all of their money on food. what some of these kids did is they figured out the system. Everyone else was trying to play the old system. These 20-somethings decided, I'm going to play the new system. I can get rich. So they spent very little on food and housing because they didn't have any other commitments. They took the rest of their money and they dumped it in the stock market. Cheap money. Stock market in the 20s went through the roof. These guys started buying, Mercedes and castles, and they started living large. Exactly what's happening now. They started living large. They were titans. The bankers who were old in the 60s and understood the old banking rules, they were all fired, and these new whiz kids came in. And the one thing they knew is it's a system of black market now. It's not the old system. It's a system of black market. And I can wheel and deal, and I can take my money and I can throw it on the roulette wheel and see what happens. And I can use the banking rules because money was funny. All of the banking rules could be used to their advantage. So all these young kids lived the life. It was free money, free drugs, free women. They were living large. Meanwhile, the older generation, trying to play by the rules, were getting screwed. All the people who had pensions and families and everything else, they were losing everything. Then came the turning point. And it's why yesterday was so important that American medicine died yesterday. It didn't die with Obama. It died yesterday with the GOP. And I'll tell you why. Because once you understand what happened in Weimar Germany before Hitler, when you understand what happened, you'll understand what I believe is coming.
The Glenn Beck Program. 888-727-BECK.
To understand what happened to healthcare yesterday and where we're headed, I want to take you back to the Weimar Republic. And I told you about the kids and how the 20-somethings, they loved the system of hyperinflation because all the rules had changed. And I'm trying to remember the chancellor of the Weimar Republic. I'll look it up here and give you the name. He's a fascinating guy. Everybody in the 1920s in Germany, everything, and see if this sounds familiar, everything revolved around politics. Everything was about who was going to lead us, one side or the other. Is it fascism? Is it communism? Is it a return to the old Germany? And a return to the old Germany was losing steam because the youth didn't have any relation to the old Germany. Because the old Germany really was discredited and buried at World War I, by the mid and late 1920s, those kids who had come of age and those who had fought and lost in World War I and had been betrayed by, see if any of this sounds familiar, coming home and then really not getting the benefits, not getting the help that they needed because the country was broke. All of that stuff festered, and the youth looked at this new world and said, oh, I can figure this out. All I have to do is just not play by the rules. And so one of the prime ministers, and I'll have to look here his name, Chancellor of the Weimar Republic, he comes in and he's part of the old class. And he takes and he reverses the hyperinflation. He issues a new mark, a new dollar, and reverses all of the effects of hyperinflation. Everyone stops talking about politics, and for a few short years, they go back to their regular life. But here's where it gets critical. Next.
This is the Glenn Beck Program. Mercury. The Glenn Beck Program.
In trying to explain to you why I believe yesterday is not a day to celebrate if you're a constitutionalist, it is one more step towards the end of healthcare as we know it, and a point where America, again, made it harder to return to a free market. I believe that we are seeing something that is going to collapse, and because now the Republicans are doing it, and the Republican conservative president is doing it, every bit of pain will be seen because the media will like to show it. So while they didn't really care that people were suffering and their healthcare cost went up $3,000, and they are still asking themselves, how did Hillary lose? Well, there's one reason. They said that I could keep my doctor. They said that I would have cheaper medicine. It went through the roof. I can't afford it. These were the liars that told me that. Well, now you have it on Trump and the GOP. They're the liars who are saying, oh, they're going to come down. The deficits are going to come down. It's going to be wonderful. But he also said, but Australia has better medicine than we do. Now the GOP is heralding socialized medicine. It's coming. And the youth won't care. And I learned this from reading a book called Defying Hitler, a book that was written in the 1930s by a guy who was coming of age in the Weimar Republic. And so he saw all of it, and for some reason, he didn't fall into the trap, and he couldn't understand why everybody was feeling this way, and so he put some intellectual, brain cells behind it, and tried to figure it out. And he wrote this book as a warning to the West. He stopped writing it in 1938 as he defected and came to America, wrote a lot of other great, great scholarly books. This one was published in 2006. It's called Defying Hitler. Let me start to the beginning. Let's start at the beginning again, and I'm going to quickly go through this in case you just joined us. The German Republic, the old German Republic, which was the envy of the world, had the greatest universities, had the greatest healthcare, had everything, humiliated in World War I. And all of the old German elites, from the pulpit to the government, we're all saying we got to get in, we've got to fight, and we're going to fight and win in World War I. What happened? They lose. They're humiliated. Children who were just coming of age at that time, they are, 10, 15 years old. They're seeing all their fathers and their brothers coming back from war, and they're no longer the same. Culture's no longer the same. Money is no longer the same. They go into the Weimar Republic, hyperinflation hits, and everyone is devastated. Everyone is devastated, except a few. And some of those few are the few that we never, ever pay attention to. They're the few that said, oh, I know how to work this system. Everybody's trying to play by the old rules. Now listen to this, because this is important for you in your own life. They saw that the system has changed. Now, this is why I say, don't hold on to the old system. Don't hold on to... I saw a documentary this morning. As I was getting ready, I was listening to this documentary about the future of truck driving and trucks and truckers. And they're all holding on. These labor unions are holding on and saying, well, no, you got to have a person in the truck. It's over. Embrace it. It's going to be over. Now, think differently. What can you do 5 years down the road? Those people, now this was a corrupt system, those people were the youth. They were 20 years old. And the bankers were losing their jobs. These 60-year-old bankers were losing their jobs, and they were losing them to 20-year-olds. 20-year-old bank president in Germany? What? Because they didn't have the family, so they could take their money and they could play the stock market. And they were getting rich. And at the same time, to keep people happy, the cabarets started up. And the cabarets were mocking the old establishment. And so now the big push was, and see if this sounds familiar, the mocking of everything that the older people knew to be true, those eternal values, okay? And they mocked all of the old stuff. And this is the world that these 20-somethings were growing up in. So they didn't have any relationship to the old Germany. They didn't have any relationship to the old people and the way the old people were running things because they broke it. They left us with this world, thank you very much. Any of this sound familiar? They were getting rich, and the government was making it easier and easier to live just beyond what was acceptable in the old world, okay? You could live any lifestyle you wanted. Before, they were a little Puritan. I mean, you needed to be married and everything else. Now you and two lesbians could go have a great time and openly, not a problem. Two lesbians, what? We are admitting that there's even gay people? No, there's no gay people in the old Germany. Now you can do whatever you want. They blur all lines. Then a chancellor comes in who's part of the old world. His name is Gustav Stresemann. Gustav comes in 1923, and he ends hyperinflation. When he ends hyperinflation, Germany celebrates, but not the youth per se, because the youth, they were living the life their fathers never lived. They were living a great life that they never had a chance to live. And now the 60-year-old bank presidents came back and order was restored. Old banking principles were restored. All of these things that made the stock market that just got those kids rich restored. They lost their money. Now, I told you this wouldn't last. Son, I told you this wouldn't last. Go apply yourself, work hard, go to school. Well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I had that world all figured out. I was sitting at the top of the world. The regular people saw Gustav Stresemann as a guy who was going to restore honor and integrity, and it was going well. I mean, we're still talking about Weimar, but it was generally going well. He drops dead at 51 years old. And it's not a conspiracy. He had, I think, a stroke or a heart attack. He was walking in the park and he just drops dead. From 1923 to 1929, he was in charge of the country, and it was going back into traditional values. And everybody stopped talking about politics again. And nobody was talking about the fascist and the communist. It was generally going back, and they thought they were on the road to recovery. The minute he died, all of that came rushing back. Now, who's going to run the country? Well, now the kids who couldn't relate to the old Germany were tired of playing by these rules, and they see the Nazis come in. And the Nazis basically don't play by the rules. If you don't care about playing by the rules, if you know all I have to do is grease the palm of this Nazi, all I have to do is just pretend that I'm with these guys and I can rise up in the ranks and I can be a bank president again. I love this. And you know what? I don't want to go back to the old Germany because I don't like this Germany that we're in. And that old Germany has been all discredited. Well, why would we want to go back? And all the people my age were saying, no, you don't understand. You don't understand. You want to go back. It's really good. It's principled. It holds everything together. No. There's new science. There's new economic policies. It's a new world, Mom and Dad. If I could take us back and plant us back in time in 1929 in Germany, and Germany was my experience of America, the kids weren't listening to the people who were saying, you don't know, Ronald Reagan was the best. In those days, we had blah, blah, blah. We started to sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. The longer this health care goes on, the more the Constitution is discredited, the more the old America is made to look corrupt and just a part of this kind of corruption, that it's always been this way. How many times have you heard this? It's always been this way. No, I'm sorry. That's revisionist history. It wasn't always this way. It couldn't have always been this way because Washington didn't have this much power. And so, yes, Washington may have been corrupt, but it didn't affect our lives because the Constitution handcuffed them away from the vast majority of the things that affected us. Nobody cared if you were a doctor what the hell Washington and their regulators said 30 years ago, except on the big issues. They were not answering to Washington for every procedure, every drug they had to prescribe. That was between you and your doctor. Then it became you and your insurance. And then the government started to heavily regulate insurance, which made the cost of insurance go through the roof. That and collusion between the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies and the government. Oh, the three of them could be very happy bedfellows. Oh, they'll get rich at your expense. But when we take one partner, and it is the partner, the one with a gun. You know, a mob is not a mob when it's three guys and nobody has a gun. Nobody has any muscle. The mob is not going to scare anybody on the street who's opening up their new fruit store or their new grocery store, and the guy comes in and says, you're going to need some protection. You know what I'm saying? No, I don't need any protection. Yeah, you do. Otherwise, I'm coming back here tomorrow, and I'm going to tell you again, you're going to need some protection. And I don't have a gun, and I'm not going to upset the apple cart. I'm not going to break your windows even or legs or nothing. I'm just going to tell you, you need some protection. No, I don't need it. It's only when a person comes into your store that has power to destroy your life. That's when it's a mob. And that is the role of the federal government when it comes to insurance programs, drug pharmaceutical companies. When they get in bed, cable industry, boy, I hate the cable industry, right? Well, the problem is they have the government as their henchman, and you can't get into the cable industry to compete because they got protection. Every single thing that sucks, that you wonder why hasn't this been fixed, it's because we called the government to fix it. Ronald Reagan used to say the scariest words in the world are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. They never help. We have to find a way to our youth, because they will not remember the days when you could just go to a doctor and you could get things done quickly. And the indoctrination started yesterday when Donald Trump, sitting next to the Prime Minister of Australia, said this.
Could get maybe even better. It's a very good bill right now. The premiums are going to come down very substantially. The deductibles are going to come down. It's going to be fantastic health care. Right now, Obamacare is failing. We have a failing health care. I shouldn't say this to our great gentleman and my friend from Australia, because you have better health care than we do.
The indoctrination started yesterday.
Oh, jeez.
That Australia, where were the world leaders flying to the great healthcare system of Australia when they got sick? They never flew to Australia. They never flew to Canada. They never flew to Great Britain. They all flew to America. Why? Because the government wasn't the heavy yet.
This is the Glenn Beck Program. Mercury.
The Glenn Beck Program.
Welcome to the program. North Korea has just accused us of launching an assassination attempt on Kim Jong-un. They allege that the CIA's plan included the use of a biochemical substance that would take out his leadership. They are preparing a response. I don't know if we've tried to take him out or not, but listen to the rest when we come back.
This is the Glenn Beck Program. Mercury.
I have to be honest with you. I feel the same way I felt in 2008. I am becoming much more clear on what's happening in the world, why it's happening. Last week I did a chalkboard on the TV show about Kim Jong-un that if you missed it, you need to see it. It was last Thursday. You can watch it on demand at TheBlaze.com. But things are shaping up, and you need to understand two things. One, North Korea has just accused us of launching an assassination attempt to kill Kim Jong-un. They allege that the CIA was using a biochemical substance that would take out the leadership during a public event. Why is this important? Well, it goes back to that chalkboard episode that I did last week, and I'll explain that and what this means to you. And the other thing is, by the end of this weekend, the French are going to have a new president. And most people that you know, and maybe even you, will go, okay, whatever, I can't worry about the French too. I contend that not only should you care about this, our attention should be hanging on every single ballot cast on Sunday. Not only should we be paying attention, we should be taking notes. There is a global shift taking place. And what happens in France, I'm telling you now, history books are going to write about this time period, the last and next 10 years. This is the time period that changes humanity for the next 100 to 1,000 years. We begin with France right now.
I will make a stand. I will raise my voice. I will hold your hand. 'Cause we are one. I will beat my drum. I have made my choice. We will overcome. 'Cause we are one. The fusion of entertainment and enlightenment. This is the Glenn Beck Program.
There have been all kinds of signs, and they were happening 10 years ago, but now they're beginning to become a little more clear, and yet it seems nobody in Washington, nobody in the press wants to pay attention to them. You must. There were signs during this last election that things were different. When Brexit happened, it was just a few months earlier, and the experts and the world elites all took notice and blamed it on the usual suspects. They blamed it on, the racists, the bigots, the uneducated, the fascists, and they're missing it. It's the same story. The elite pointing the finger and name calling, ultimately pointing the finger at the middle class, the workers, the ones who are struggling just to get by as the businesses and the factories are being shut down. They are feeling squashed. The masses and the elites are playing a game. The establishment, both in Washington and Brussels, are all doing the same thing, advocating for open borders. And their constituents are seeing job after job disappear. Everybody, it feels as though your job is under attack, but not for the elites. So the elites, their jobs are fine. They'll stay in their ivy-covered walls and they'll be fine. They'll keep getting reelected, or they have tenure. Don't worry about it. Increased immigration doesn't affect them in the slightest. To the contrary, it's a cheap source of labor for the factories and for their homes. More people for the government to pay for college. But to the blue-collar communities that are already struggling, it is Whether it is just in their mind or reality, it's more competition coming in to take the jobs that they don't already have. And the global progressive machine keeps chugging along, and anyone who disagrees with it, we can't have a conversation. They'll just shout a name at you: racist, bigot, Islamophobe. Meanwhile, the storm clouds continue to build, and France is showing to be the barometer this weekend of what is coming next. Perhaps it's poetic justice that is happening now in France, the birthplace of European liberalism. If Charles Dickens were alive today, he'd be writing the same story, except it wouldn't be the tale of two cities. It'd be the tale of two ideologies. And he could start it the same way: best of times, worst of times. This is how outdated the system is. The terms left wing and right wing originated with the French Revolution. Most people don't know this. The members of the Third Estate, those outside of the clergy and the nobility, they were meeting with King Louis. And King Louis is like, I've had enough of this. We're fine. And so the people, they couldn't get in. They barred the doors to the palace. And so they went to a tennis court to discuss the fate of France. Those that wanted a democratic republic sat on the left. Everyone else sat on the right. And these labels stuck. If you were on the left of the tennis court or the right of the tennis court, the left and right. The left became known as the champions of the working class. The right became known as the conservative anti-socialists. That's where it started, on a tennis court. But over the last several decades, everything has changed. The left in Europe is anything but pro-working class. They support open borders, mass immigration, which take jobs away from the local communities. They support mega trade conglomerates, which threaten local factories, small businesses. The jobs have dried up. Income went down. Everyone was encouraged to leverage the farm to be able to keep everything propped up. Does any of this sound familiar? I know it's happening in France, but it's the same story here. The same scenario. You look at Hillary Clinton, a woman who is now still trying to figure out why she lost. Does anything about her tell you that she's a champion of the working class? She may have been at one point, may have been. Do you think she's a working class? I personally believe, and it's only because of watching her actions, but this may be wrong, so I give her the benefit of the doubt, but watching her, I think she despises the little people. She doesn't want to be around the little people. She doesn't want to go to a state fair. And there's nothing wrong with that. But her trying to act like she likes all of that stuff is an act. And that's one of the reasons why she lost, is because you don't believe her. She's fake. The people who were standing up, she called deplorables. She acted more like she detested the blue-collar families rather than being their spokesperson. She likes to hang out in the big cities and mingle with her own. But go to Wisconsin and rub elbows with the little people? Do we have enough hand sanitizer? It's beneath her, really. The Democratic president signed NAFTA and pushed for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was the Democrats. And all of those initiatives threatened the workers of the blue collar. The left and the right have no meaning anymore. Look at what happened yesterday with health care. You would think that the president, who just said Australia's healthcare system is better than ours, but we're working to get towards that, and this Trumpcare is the first step in that direction, you'd think he was a Democrat, a socialist, somebody on the left, but no, he's not. Now let me bring you back to the French. The French election is revealing the next stages in this global political shift. And this is what I talked about when I was mocked back at Fox in 2008, holding up the book on France in French called The Coming Insurrection. And it predicted this. No, it didn't predict it. It showed the roadmap to this. And I used that to say the French are going to melt down. It's only a matter of time. Look what's happening. And read this book, because that's what's coming next here. Learn from the French. Here's what happened. The first round of elections 2 weeks ago saw a dogfight between a socialist, Macron, a member of the far right, Le Pen, and a communist, Mélenchon. Macron represents everything France has had for the past decade. He is the status quo. However, he has positioned himself. He's a liar. He dropped out of the party and said, I'm not with them. That's crazy. I'm not with them. He did what every two-faced Tea Party Republican did when the Tea Party was gaining strength. They jettisoned out and said, I'm a different kind of Republican. Only a few meant that. He does not. He wants to remain in the EU. He's a socialist. He wants to keep immigrants flowing into their borderless country. He's status quo. He's just younger. He looks better in a suit than his predecessor, who, by the way, is also his boss. Besides Macron, who is expected to win this election, nearly half of the country voted for a candidate on the extreme ends of each spectrum. The far right, and I mean literal fascist right, and literal communist left. Now think about that for a second. It was over 40%. The French are so sick of being lied to and taken advantage of that they are willing to go back to a communist system, which they have seen fail all over the world, or a fascistic system which they were occupied under with Germany. At this point, they don't care. They just want a champion to make the pain stop. They want a savior. They want a strong man. Read my first book, The Real America. Jesus and Hitler had one thing in common. They could both look at tired, frustrated, hungry people and say, follow me. I will feed you. Now, here's the scary part. As I said, Macron is probably going to win. Anything could happen. There could be a massive terrorist strike, which could change things on Sunday. But the coalitions are teaming up to stop Marine Le Pen en masse. Now, Marine Le Pen is scary as hell. I don't want her to win. But consider the long-term effects of another 5 years of the status quo. If Marine Le Pen gets in now, she will not have the ability to do what she wants to do. But that's what they said about the Chancellor of Germany, too. I'm aware of that. There are no good answers anymore. But another 5 years of the status quo, Macron not being able to deliver and exposing himself as a liar, that's 5 more years of the same policies that drove nearly half of the country towards fascism or communism. Neither Macron or Le Pen would be able to get a majority in parliament. But 5 more years, everything could change. Remember, it was 8 years ago that everyone said that I was crazy for saying that Le Pen was a player, that communists would rise. They just took 40% of the vote. I've predicted to an awful lot of scrutiny that the Islamists, the far right, the radical left would all work together towards a common goal. How many people made fun of that? How many people did you hear on TV say, the far right and the far left, they're going to work together? Oh, he doesn't even know. I mentioned earlier that coalitions were forming against Marine Le Pen. But guess who's not hopping on that train? Mélenchon and his millions of Trotsky communists. Wait a minute. The far left is not standing up against the far right? 65% of his voters say they won't vote for Macron. Now, I don't believe a vote against somebody is a vote for somebody else, but you could make the case that if 65% of them stay out, it's going to be a lot closer than you think. Aren't Mélenchon and Macron technically both on the same left side as the 1789 tennis court? Aren't they both standing on the same side? They're both socialists. One's a socialist, one's a communist. Why is the left not playing for the left? And what about the Islamists? The French haven't seen this much Islamic extremism since the caliphate was expelled in 732. What's happening here? The scary truth is that at a time, the time of radicals is rising. Tyranny, radicalism on the left and the right, that's on the march. Both the far right and the radical left promise the same result: burn the entire system down to the ground. And as we have heard from people here among our own friends, I just want somebody to stop it. I just want to burn the whole damn thing down, start over. And if you think you're isolated from all of this, America is in for a painful wake-up call. What is currently developing in France, we may very well see in 3 years in our own country. The Democrats are continuing to push exactly the same narratives that lost them the support of the working and the middle classes in this last election. Republicans aren't even conservative anymore. In the last election, a registered independent socialist almost led the Democratic ticket, and a lifelong Democrat with zero conservative credibility, who now has just signed in more Obamacare, it's Trumpcare, just in a different way, and stated while he did it, the Australian healthcare system is much better than the American. He is your, quote, conservative leader. And just like Macron and Le Pen, both the United States and French governments are deadlocked, not able to get anything done, and ruled by corruption. Look at the Antifa riots all across the country here. We are breeding Marxist radicals just like France. What will 3 years of the status quo and the media fighting the people do to us? I want to be clear. The media fighting the people, not fighting Donald Trump, fighting the people. The worse this gets, we will follow in the same footsteps of France, and we will look to more and more extreme ends of the spectrum. Who will be our savior, our champion? What strong man will arise to make it all stop? What will happen as more people awaken from this progressive nightmare? As sure as water will wet us, as surely as fire will burn, the gods of the copybook headings with terror and slaughter return.
You're listening to the Glenn Beck Program.
Mercury.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Welcome to the program. Glad you're here. Jeffy was getting your oil changed yesterday?
I got the oil changed in my automobile, and usually, I mean, Ellen's on, right? So you're waiting to pick up your car.
I go to
watching Ellen.
The only time I ever see Ellen is if I ever have to go, get something done to the car or go to a doctor. Then I'm watching Ellen.
You're there watching her. So
Yep.
everybody's usually just yucking it up with Ellen. And I overhear a lady talking to another man. I'm a little concerned over this North Korea thing. I'm not sure what to make of that. I've never heard anybody talk about North Korea at the car shop before.
Getting your oil changed.
Yeah.
Hey, stranger, are you concerned about North Korea? I'm a little concerned about quantitative easing.
Right. I thought you were here. I thought you were there.
Where's Glenn? Was she wearing a Glenn Beck t-shirt?
Yes.
So let me explain. For some of this audience, I'm sorry to bore you with France and North Korea talk. But for the rest of the audience, you've got to understand what this stuff is, because I don't think anybody's really explaining it over the horizon. And that's kind of what you pay me with your time. That's what you pay me for. That's what I'm really best at, is seeing the general trends coming over the horizon. Let me show you what North Korea means and what happened just yesterday. It makes a couple of things that I've been wondering about out loud fall into place. Next.
The Glenn Beck Program. Mercury. program.
Hello, America. All right, so can we have fun here in a second, please? Can we, Pat? Can you please get into the fun department someplace? Because what did we start with last hour? It was really important. Oh, healthcare.
Healthcare.
I explained healthcare and what that means to the future.
Then it's France.
And what that
North
means.
Korea.
Now I have to do North Korea. So could you just open up a fun file someplace and have something?
Be happy to.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So we'll do that here in a second. First, let me tell you about North Korea. There was something that Kim Jong-un did that the world saw, that there was just easier ways to do it, a different way to do it. And this stuck out to me, and I said, when it happened, and I think I mentioned it on the air last week or so, it's almost as if Kim Jong-un is saying to the world, screw you, I'll do whatever I want, and there's nothing you can do. And I kind of believe that, but he didn't need to kill his brother the way he did, okay? Why would he kill his brother in a place that he knew would have 80 different camera angles? Why did he kill his brother using VX gas, which says that's a state hit? Why would he do that? And my first thought was, okay, well, he just wants everybody to see it and everybody to know I can do that. But he doesn't want to be known as killing his own brother in his own state. Now he can control what's coming in and etc. Why would he do that? I think a piece has fallen into the puzzle that is extraordinarily important. Remember, we are still technically at war with North Korea. We only had an armistice with North Korea back in the 1950s. So we were in the Korean War. China got involved. MacArthur pushed all of them all the way up to the very top of North Korea. And he said, let me topple China too. I can topple China. He was fired, and it went back to the 38th parallel, and that was the split, and we called an armistice because we didn't want to get into a war with China. Okay. Since that armistice was called, they have museums about the war crimes of America. They have propaganda from the beginning of time about how bad America is and how America is causing their problems. And outside of their borders, the world loves North Korea. It's just America from stopping North Korea from being the world power that it should be. That's what their people believe. And he has had 60 years to dig in and bury all of his armaments. He has enough armory all buried on the border to be able to kill all 22 million people in Seoul without massive weapons of mass destruction. He can kill all 22 million people in about 3 hours, just with conventional arms, because Seoul is right there. The prime minister of South Korea lives like 10 minutes from the DMZ. So you can kill a mass of people. That's without the missile sites where those are roving and we don't know where they are. And those are without chemical weapons, which we know he has, and without nuclear weapons. Last week I did a chalkboard on Kim Jong-un, and I brought out the chalkboard and the magnets. And I said, okay, so here's Kim Jong-il, and he looks, I can't see Kim Jong-il and not see those puppets. What were those, that puppet movie about North Korea? Team America. Yeah, Team America. I mean, he just looks like that little puppet from Team America. And he's always frowning, and he's got the big glasses, and he's like, and he's just so angry all the time. And that's where you see him. Kim Jong-il took over from his father, the one that people really revere, the one that was such a god that they restarted the calendar. It's only the year 105 in North Korea, and it was reset. The calendar was reset to his birth, and they loved him. It was good times. When he died, Kim Jong-il took over, and that's when the trouble started. It was economic trouble. It was this trouble with the West now that couldn't get in control. Starvation started happening. So the people, while they revere Kim Jong-il, they didn't like him. And he wasn't a lovable guy. And he certainly wasn't his father. But they blame the West for the problems, not him. Now we look at Kim Jong-un and we say, what a dope this guy is, right? He's a fat Twinkie with his sausage fingers, and he's a dope. No, he's not. If you look at his clothing, the way he's cutting his hair, and the way he speaks, the way he smiles, the way he hangs out with people and is imaged and hanging out as one of the people, that he is imaging himself as his grandfather, not his father. And if you put their pictures side by side, he looks the role, and he's playing everything into it. So they love him. Here's what happened yesterday. North Korea just accused us of launching an assassination attempt on Kim Jong-un. They allege that the CIA's plan included the use of a biochemical substance. Now, where have we seen someone try to kill somebody with a biological substance recently? Everything Kim Jong-un has been doing lately is all for a specific purpose. Everything is calculated. Go back and watch last week's television show, last Thursday's on demand at TheBlaze.com/TV. Everything from his physical appearance to the escalation of his nuclear program. We can look at him as a giant punchline, but we should not. So what is this accusation setting up? The alleged attack puts the recent assassination of his brother now in a whole new context, doesn't it? Why would Kim Jong-un kill his brother on the way home to North Korea with somebody that just put a biological substance over his mouth when you could kill him in his sleep without a television camera? Why in an airport? Kim Jong-un can claim and has claimed that it was the United States that killed his brother, and now he can claim they're going after him as well. Kim Jong-un purged 300 people from his government since he assumed power. This also gives him yet another excuse to purge even more power. Anyone who is dissenting within his inner circle over the last year, especially over the boiling conflict with the United States, what do you think's going to happen to them? Were they part of this plot to kill him? What Kim Jong-un is doing is solidifying his power. He yesterday pledged a significant response. Now, is this setting up the nuclear test, which we said we will have to respond to? Is he setting up to his people why I'm doing this test? Saying I'm going to detonate another nuclear bomb under the ground, which he knows is a supposed red line for us. I'm going to detonate this bomb just to show them that you cannot kill me. You can't try to take my life. You already killed my brother. Remember, if he detonates it, it's a red line. The Trump administration has said he cannot cross that line. If he crosses that line and we do nothing, does Trump respond because he has to? Because the last time a president said it was a red line and they crossed it and we didn't respond, look what happened to the world. We are playing three-dimensional chess at times, I believe, with checkers. I hope we are playing three-dimensional chess. I have much greater confidence in the people around this president than I did in the people that were around this president last time. But I want you to know, Kim Jong-un is setting something up, and this is a long-term plan. He killed his brother in the airport for this reason.
We've heard somewhere that he's one smart cookie. Starting to look like maybe he is.
I know.
He is. Yeah. He is. He is on a. He is not making individual moves. He is playing chess. This move was planned out as he was planning the death of his brother in an airport.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds pretty plausible.
Yes.
It does.
What does that mean? It depends on how we react. But I just, please prepare yourself for trouble. Please prepare yourself for, Seoul is the 5th largest economy in the world.
South Korea.
Yes, Seoul, South Korea is
The last couple
or
of-
6th, somewhere in there.
Yeah, the last couple of,
10th.
I mean, it was like
I think it.
10 million in the city proper.
Oh, yeah, wait, you're right. It's
I think
10.
it's like
You're
10th.
right. It's 10, and Japan is the 3rd largest economy. Japan is right there.
Yeah.
And Japan will be struck by North Korea, and North Korea says they will destroy Tokyo. If they just took out part of Tokyo and part of Seoul, South Korea, the global economy will crash overnight.
And I understand worrying about it, but, you know, the last couple of missile attempts have not left me too scared.
I agree because
it seems like we're messing with them.
Yeah,
right?
it seems like we
if
have.
we can do that,
Good.
It does make you feel a little better, doesn't it?
Good.
It
Yes.
does. It does. But again, conventional weapons, he has them all buried.
Right. Yeah.
All
Yeah,
the
yeah.
conventional weapons can kill 22 million in 3 hours. See, what we have to do is we have to send over, and I showed this on that TV show, we have to send over all of our B-1 bombers to get the missile sites. Now, the missile sites are not known.
Can't
They're
miss.
roving.
Can't
and
miss.
you cannot miss one. So you have to get all of them. At the same time, you have to bomb all of the artillery on the DMZ. That'll take almost everything we have. You certainly know that dug in is not going to be easy. We're not going to be able to take those out in 15 minutes.
Right.
You at least have, I mean, let's pretend that we're, Thor with the hammer. You at least got an hour of fighting. How many does that kill? You miss one weapon if they're able to hit Japan. The 3rd largest economy and the 10th largest economy have just, imagine this. California and Texas are hit with a major blow to their economy and their infrastructure. Do you think the United States stands? What happens to the rest of the world?
No, because I think taken on their own, California would be the 3rd largest economy in the world, and
Right.
Texas is the 8th or something.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we're talking the same kind of thing.
That would devastate.
It would
the
devastate
nation.
the United States. And if the United States went down, the whole Western world goes down. We're talking about that kind of devastation. And I hope to God it doesn't happen. I'm not predicting that it's going to happen. I'm just saying something like that is eventually going to happen because we're just on this road all around the world. We are just getting so close all around the world. This one took another step closer because I really believe he set his brother, his death up to make it look like us so he could move. It does make sense.
This is
The Glenn Beck Program. Mercury. You're listening to The Glenn Beck Program.
Okay, so Pat opened up the fun file, and I don't believe this to be true.
No way is this true.
No
Of course
way.
it's true. Everybody's reporting
I'm
it.
looking it up right now.
There was a baby born
Yes.
with mom's IUD in its hand. Congratulations.
no
It's a boy.
way that's
And he's
real.
holding your IUD.
Photo of a photo of him
no
on Instagram
way
with her
that's real.
IUD in his hand.
Okay, we're checking
Okay,
it now
all
because
right.
it does sound too cool.
It certainly
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, we're going to get to the.
And there's a
All
Snopes
right,
story.
don't look
so
it
we'll
up.
See.
Don't
Okay.
look it up. Don't look it up.
Yeah, you got to hang on.
You
and
got to
find out
hang
what
on.
it really is.
This is going to be good.
This is tremendous.
Yeah, that's coming up in just a minute. Stand by.